In this video, I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process I take in my roles every time I have to work with a new business leader, a new decision maker, in order to build those effective and efficient work relationships. In this video, I'm going to take us through the PACE framework I created based on my own experience, which ultimately helps us build and have effective work relationships with business leaders or decision makers, as I often refer to them. The PACE framework stands for prepare and position, align and adapt, communicate and course correct, execute and elevate. Let me explain more with some examples. So for example, let's say I've just started in my new role and I'm in a brand new organization. I'm very likely to have a number of one-to-one meetings where I'm going to meet a number of business leaders, decision makers I will have to work with more proactively. So in order for me to prepare for these one-to-one meetings, I would make sure that I complete relevant homework about them, about their role, about their teams, department, business strategies, anything I can get my hands on. More importantly, I would want to anticipate some of the challenges they're going through. I would want to know how they make money for the particular organization, if it's a for-profit organization, and also to understand their people analytics, some of the basic people stats, how many roles they have, skills and competencies, vacancies, attrition level, sickness level, anything really that can give me a bit of a context as to what kind of challenges they could be dealing with. The next thing I would also be quite ready to talk about is my own role. I really shouldn't assume that some of these people know really what my role is all about. So we should be ready to talk about our role and how we can add value to their business and their teams by working together. Another good point to add is that these people, these business leaders, decision makers, are technically our managers as well. So we may report to someone else in our own function, but then again, when it comes to supporting directly business leaders in their business delivery or whatever their challenges are, they're also our managers, indirect managers. So it's very important to agree objectives for our role at least 12 months ahead that we can break down in some ways of working and objectives and actions that would work for them and their leadership teams, especially if you're going to be part of their leadership teams more proactively. In order for these meetings to really flow and for you to get a good feeling and feel like you're building good relationship, it's important to turn up curious, listen, just be ready to ask loads of questions. So try to be yourself and be a bit more personable and human. It doesn't matter the level these people operate at. At the end of the day, we're all humans and we should be able to ask some of the questions where they could open up a little bit or at least talk about their personal challenges. Now, the next thing I do, which I don't think many people do, is to be brave enough to ask them about their leadership style, their communication style, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And the reason I like to ask these questions quite proactively is that I don't like to overthink. I really don't want to overthink if they like long emails, short emails, if they like data, if they don't like data, and things like that. I really like to ask upfront for them to tell me a little bit about themselves. And most of the time, people do like to talk about themselves. So when you turn up quite curious about them and their work style, their natural leadership style, and how they like to work, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of information that will help you not overthink, and you will simply know and agree as to how to work with this particular individual quite effectively. So feel free to ask questions such as, can you take me through your communication style? What's your preferred communication style? Do you like emails? Do you like long emails, short emails? Do you like data? Can I randomly call you, text you, or do you prefer more formal meetings? Can you take me through your leadership style? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? And things like that. So feel free to go into some of these kind of questions, because the reason you're asking is to build a really good relationship. And you perhaps have an opportunity to talk about your leadership style and what really works for you as well. But at the end of the day, we need to turn up quite adaptable and flexible. This is what we get tested on. I then suggest you talk about how often you should meet, what you should talk about in some of these regular meetings. So perhaps you agree to meet monthly or bi-weekly or weekly, which is absolutely fine. You should agree some common agenda that both parties should be bringing to the table. Once you've started working really well and already had a couple of meetings and you feel that you're making some progress, I would say after each meeting, feel free to send a brief summary as to what you've discussed to make sure that you have it as a reminder next time you speak. I would still, after each meeting, especially if it's an important stakeholder, summarize as to what we talked about, what we're going to cover next, what I promised to do. Perhaps they've promised to do something, and I would make sure that's attached to the next meeting as well. So whenever the next meeting comes, you can easily say, as we discussed last time, as a reminder, here we go, what we've covered and some of the actions we agreed. I've summarized all of this for us and created a Notion template, which you can use in your roles. You can download it for free from my digital store. You will find a list of questions and a table and all sorts of things that may benefit you in your roles. The next step is align and adapt. This is a very important step for you to pause and reflect, especially once you've built a good work relationship in 3 to 6 months' time. This is our opportunity to proactively ask for feedback and adapt ourselves instead of waiting for those annual dreadful performance review meetings. So once I've had an opportunity to work with someone for about 6 months' time, I would want to pause and reflect and use one of these regular meetings to seek feedback. I use this as an opportunity to ask proactively as to how we have worked together, and I tend to focus quite objectively on the work and workload we have agreed rather than what they think of me as a person, and remove that subjectivity, which is often what we really dread. So in the way I tend to ask some of these questions, perhaps you could say something along the lines of, we have worked together for the last 6 months. These are the pieces of work I supported you with. Is there anything that you would have liked to have seen more of or less of? And is there anything else I could have done differently to drive different outcomes? And this is perfectly great opportunity to actually get some feedback on the pieces of work rather than on me as a person, because sometimes it does depend on what kind of piece of work are we dealing with? Who was I supposed to work with? What else was going on? And things like that. So sometimes it could be that there is a particular piece of work, I do a job really well, or there could be a separate piece of work and I didn't do a good job because it was really outside my control. I couldn't really do X, Y, Z because of someone else, or there was someone else in another function making certain decisions that had an impact on the outcome. So these are the kind of things that I often want to call out. Is this in my control? If yes, clearly I want to do something about that. Or is this outside my control? If yes, let's talk about that. So to make sure that there is a really good understanding as to why certain things didn't go down as well or as planned. And these are the things I often do on a regular basis with my decision makers. The next step is communicate and course correct. So this is all about you having those regular meetings. You have your great agenda. You know what you're going to talk about. But sometimes some of these meetings could be about great updates. It could be your pieces of work are going really well. And I really want to take you through an example as to how you can give an update when things are going so well. But then again, on the other hand, there could be meetings when you have to give an update on something that's not going down so well or as well as you hoped it would. So for example, if you're giving an update on a particular piece of work where things are going down so well, you need to remind your business leader as to whatever that is all about. So give a brief statement or a brief context. Then we need to break down the reasons as to why it's going really well. So think about scale, size, numbers, whatever is contributing to it and where the outlook is going and heading. So if it's on track, make sure that you say that, and also feel free to ask for their opinions or if they have any more feedback or context or requests for you to take into account. Now, in our second example, if things are not going down so well, these are those dreaded update meetings where you may be thinking, oh gosh, how do I actually deliver and give feedback on this particular piece of work that's really important, but it's not going down as planned, and I now have to go to this particular business meeting and give an update. So very similarly to the first example, remind them of the context as to whatever this particular piece of work is all about. And if things aren't going down so well or as planned, feel free to break down the reasons. So you need to talk about scale, size, numbers as to why things are not going down so well. Give those factors and give a bit more context and scenarios as to what contributed to it. But in order for you to give that reassurance, you are onto it, you're gripping this really well, you then need to say something along the lines of, and here we go, what we are doing about it. And then you're going to take them through whatever your action plan is to be able to get it back on track. So that's pretty much how it works. And then you can play it back to them and say, do you have any concerns, observations, and is there anything else you would like us to take into account? I've spoken to a number of people, and I believe if we do X, Y, and Z, we will be able to get it back on track. And the last step is about execute and elevate. Now, it's quite important for some of these regular business meetings, especially if they are reoccurring meetings in our diary, we want to make sure that they add value, that they are giving something to our stakeholders, and that we're also benefiting from those. And I often find when you work with senior leaders, there has to be a bit more than just an update meeting or information sharing, because anyone can find any information that they need from time to time. But I often challenge myself and think about, would they pay for this meeting if I was hired externally and I didn't work for them as as an employee. And every time I'm speaking to business leaders, I tend to bring in lots of research, external context, business data, anything that's happening external is a bit of a trend that's particularly relevant to their organization or their business unit or a business line or a department, whatever that is, to have those kind of interesting, continuous professional development conversations. It serves as a bit of a coaching, upskilling session as well. So these are the kind of other elements of our role that we have to be thinking about, not just doing the doing, it's also giving them good quality conversations that they're benefiting from. I also issue weekly newsletters. You can subscribe to it on my own website. You can find a link down below. If you have liked this video, there are many other similar ones on my channel. So I'll see you in the next one.